Hey, what's going on? I don't know if you can hear, I don't know if you could hear me. Sorry, I kind of had to speak up so my computer could, hear me. Basically, um, let's see. Over the past few years, I have designed various different colliders and how to find different types of of, of continuations equations that would make point-like discoveries. My collider actually is is a very different collider. It's completely different than the repetitive loader and colliding into a specific point, um, sustaining a light, or just doing a single collision. Sometimes you do multiple collisions at different um, milliseconds and or different minutes behind the seconds or hours, to evaluate the collision type. Although my collider is multiple collisions all at once. It has a center point instead of the ring-like colliders where it's accelerated extremely fast. It goes to a central point where the collision collides from both sides from the loader to the ring and to the point where we find our discoveries from the impact. Thus, my collider is a multi-angle. Um, let's say we have this flat space, right? And there are eight different loaders or particles onto this linear track system around a center point where the track system would collide and the different point like particles in or other charged like atoms along with the particle like interactions could lead to a collision that would not only make breakthroughs and or profound in the indications into the collision. It would lead us into more in-depth discoveries of not only physical dimensions but the energy release that's released from the point light collisions and how we can sustain them. The sustainment of the energy and or the point light collisions, if we find something or if there's a breakthrough, we can harness it using plasma since the collision chamber where everything comes, it would be harnessed with plasma because plasmas would be in the sphere of where the collisions would take place. Since plasma is the most abundant, um, a most abundant region of an electronic state, since there are only um, four fundamental forces, and in physics, which is um, gravity, the electromagnetic force, nuclear strong and nuclear weak. Since we can sufficiently make microgravity with our fusion reactor and or just a plasma reactor where it's not really a fusion reactor where we don't have to make as big and or cluster of particles going into this chamber where we could sufficiently make a fusion reactor into the detector. Thus the detector not only just be a detector like the colliders that we have today, the detector would lead to different regions of not only breakthroughs of our discoveries in the particles, also would sustain the subatomic particles. The subatomic particles would be locked into electronic configurations, and the electronic configurations would ripple in a lot of different ways with this microgravity sustained from the plasma. So not only will the collision take place, but it will come back together harnessed and the light would stay there instead of the light being through the collision and going away. Or the radiative half-life through the collision would be the expanse of the energy and how the energy took place and how it rippled, as it expands over space and time. Now, since mine would expand and then stay inside, mine would be an aspect of more that we discover with sustaining light and energy and how not only it becomes radiative, this point like energy like interaction with nuclear physics, but how we could use and understand more of these point like light interactions, how long they could be sustained. Although we could turn off the plasma reactor at any time and the fission would just go away. Everything that we sustain from the energy like interactions of the different collisions that make these point like like charge interactions in our nuclear phases, maybe sustaining microscopic black holes or different type of space matter attractions, to space. The charge of the sustainment attracted maybe antimatter and or a few different gray matter and or dark matter and or the introductions to the various ranges of dark matter and their charge like clusters of electronic spins or where the gravity is with these different charge like interactions and or the different introductions to dark energy and their ranges and different sectors of the universe. Now, dark matter is also in different sectors of the universe, although since we will make these different collisions and their point-like charges will take place of releasing energy, the attraction to space can be phenomenal, and it would be like a guidance to a wave guidance or a point-like guidance that would help us get through different obstacles and dimensions of space and time on Earth that we've never really had the guidance to get through. So sustaining light is always key. Light would always be positive and never be negative. Light would Light is a carrying force, but it would carry us through different translations of light, since all the light ripples would be through a cone of knowledge. Light would only carry knowledge through every collision. So every translation would obviously be through light. So it would be a light-like translation, which would be a little more complex than like a lot of people would think. Light is a traveling wave. Light carries light is a carrying wave. It travels. It would only carry knowledge through it. So every time we sustain light in some sort of point-like reaction, um, it would only channel and or be specific ion channels of how the propagation of its light-like channel and or its light-like speed would interact through in light-like ways. Now, none of them would ever be dark, unless we sustain the light sustain different types of quantities of microscopic black holes, which would not be dark. It would be more like how per se trying to express radiative energy, although in a strong nuclear way with its nuclear phases of the electromagnetic force, where the electromagnetic force and or the ripple had to be more accelerated for the propagation of the light at that specific frequency to channel out a frequency of light. So but those are more in depth, and they would probably have to synchronize so different or make entanglements to these different regions in space. Not only were they attracted and or anti-attracted, you know, it's a big region, and you have to understand a lot about not only the elements but also the different physical phases of matter, since they are only physical. Like they would be inside these gravitational forces. Since these gravitational forces involved would have quantities of elements, quantities of antimatter, and quantities of matter, phases in these burning gravitational stars. Um, the electromagnetic force and the ripple effects of their speed of light would take place into the channeling of how these quantum connections happen in or these gas planets, where the plasma and or the electromagnetic interaction would interact in a specific way of channeling these frequencies, since the frequencies and or the expansion of the frequency is traveling at a specific wavelength, not only from the ground of the planet, but it's traveling through space. Now, there's a lot about light and or traveling frequencies that you should probably know about. I went back to it for a while, and I learned and made different foundations in my discoveries, not only from the cooling of nuclear and or the wormholes of nuclear and or the sustaining different black holes, and there's so many different nuclear phases from it's like really complex to categorize them, and they always, people start to categorize them from it being like either flare like and the wavelength of the flare, where or like, I mean, I'm not trying to talk about how the categories became. It's just whenever you see nuclear reactions and how nuclear interactions take place on the sun, it's really complex, because everything is a point-like charge interaction. Especially whenever some of the frequencies reach the surface of the sun, they travel at specific ratios of nuclear energy. Since the specific ratio of nuclear energy will travel at a specific frequency, it would also propagate through different wavelengths of color, and I mean and like sometimes the color wavelengths can affect different distances in space as it propagates. I mean, there's so many different other things from molecular interactions and or how far these wavelengths can go, or its alternation, and or its direct propagation, and how fast the frequency would go. I mean, some people look at the sun, they see light, right? They would say the speed of light travels at such and such. They would give a predominant point in decimal of how fast the speed of light travels. You turn on a light and it's there. At the faster than you can blink your eye. Um, but with the sun, it's a little bit different. You see, the frequencies and or its nuclear container of various chemical elements and liquid metal, and then the bending force of using these different metals and attraction of dark energy and reactions of dark matter, and not only those interactions, but the phases along with this gravitational strength, and how the nuclear energy is used, weak or strong, to make these propagations to go along at these different distances. I mean, it's more than just aligning with other stars. There's other things that goes on there. Sometimes it's like just interactions into our own solar system, and sometimes it's deep space interactions. Um, I mean, it's really intense. Sometimes it's not really interactions with the stars. Sometimes it's just interactions with just deep space. Although, whenever since we are a living quantity into the solar system, and we have these other ratios of sustainment, spin, storage, gravity, and or these other planets that spin, store gravity, and its electronic waves and or configuration. Um, it's completely different. It would show the different methods of sustaining dark energy and or dark matter, because it's live plasma, or the electromagnetic force is visible at the speed of of their different propagations and or storms per se. Call them storms, but like you see the storage the storage of space, constantly being collided with the core of those planets and space and the sun. So, anyways, back to the sun. We see we see the propagations like traveling at these specific frequencies of waves, right? You know, and it's the channeling, and can be pretty intense. Mostly, if anything goes on that Earth, sometimes it's intense heat waves, because using all that nuclear, or a ratio of nuclear energy, because it confines so much nuclear energy in different layers of its starlight. It's more in depth. Different layers, though, would do different things. So, especially if it's doing like a vacuum or cooling phase. Sometimes it's just cooling because it's nuclear energy being used, and sometimes it's not cooling and it's just like sustaining black holes or microscopic black holes to sustain different frequencies at different layers of like going towards the center of the star. So it's like sometimes it's too inside with this nuclear energy, and sometimes it's too outside, where we would see the magnetic flux and or these frequency like interactions spherically around it, and or in sectors and ratios of the star. So I wanted to introduce my collider, because looking at the sun made me think about um, how I can make collisions, and why my collider would make these astonishing breakthroughs, using a gravitational force and or the Earth ground, along with the core of the planet, because the core of the planet would be another sector of interest, but it's not anything that I would, you know, I I'm not really, not trying to overthink things. It's just the geomagnetic field and how different things happen underground where we can't really see the flux like we can see on the sun. It's completely different. Although you look at like the gas planets and you see the magnetic flux in similar ways, and as because you can see like these big giant rings of plasma all over in different sectors of the gas planets, or you might see like these spiraling microgravity ratios that attract different types of point like particles and or charges or antimatter or space phases. You know, every spiral on Jupiter are different types of charges. You know what I mean? Yeah, attract different types of, of phases of space and or sustain different types of wormholes. Um, I mean, it's the introduction to Jupiter is like really intense. The introduction to Saturn is really intense, and Uranus and Neptune. They're different storms, and they have different types of elements inside, which have these wild like reactions with like wavelengths and their distance and how they store these different matter phases that we could greatly use for our future just from being around them. Like for example, I was thinking about making these satellite systems and we can use different spattle lasers to be inside their magnetic field since they are gas planets, and we can do things and we can sufficiently interact with using energy and or the electromagnetic force because it will sufficiently make electromagnetic waves travel back towards the satellite system, which would make gravitational waves. It would be more introductions to gravity, gravitational equations, and or the electromagnetic force and the nuclear phases, since we would be bonding in or bending or in or making different type of entanglement like interactions with these masses. I mean, the other introductions to what we could do with the masses would be um, more profound through our research, but we haven't gotten there yet. Although we just observe in the future we could do more. We can also store different types of matter phases and record these like electronic ripples that would be most likely dimensional gateways to open things since we stored the electronic configuration with our computer systems and know how to replicate these frequencies and or the electronic configuration using electronic systems and or interacting with these nuclear systems to channel and open different dimensional systems around our solar system in mid-space and or in planets. So it's a great thing we can do in our future. The discoveries from our collisions would only lead to greater sustainments through light and gravitational forces. Hopefully everybody's having a nice day.